Hi everybody, welcome back to Capricorn Radio TV. We are in the presence of greatness today. We're going to be speaking to Mr. Christopher Everard. This show has been a long time in the making, so we're going to talk about his book, The Stone Age Psychedelia. What an awesome book it is. Chris is with us on the line at the moment, and just a little bio on him before I bring my guest on. Chris Everard is a British author, film director and broadcaster. He presents TV shows about historical subjects and has appeared on the BBC, NBC, TVE, TV1, Canal Plus, and he's feature specialist presenter for CNN Plus. You can check out his website, ChristopherEverard.com. He is a presenter of the TV series The Magic of Egypt on the Enigma channel. That's at enigmatv.com. And myself and Chris share many interests. This is more like a think tank today. And I'm really, really excited. We've got so much stuff to get through. We've got a few little announcements just to mention before I bring on Chris. Of course, you can check out the Megalithic Odyssey Symposium. That's megalithicodyssey.com. You can check out a really awesome lineup of speakers and presenters for that. And we're going to feature a little bit on megaliths today with Chris. We've actually got so many overlapping interests. This show could go anywhere today. And I think we're going to probably start with some really exciting discoveries that I know Chris is at the forefront of keeping up with research. He lives the research in real time. So without further ado, let's bring on our guest. Hi, Chris, you're with me on the line.
Hello, James. Nice to be with you.
Oh, great to hear your voice, Chris.
Yeah. You're coming through nice and clear.
Oh, nice. And I tried to give you a little intro there, Chris, to people, because I know you've got your own radio show, and you do what I do. You do radio, you do TV, you do megaliths.
I do. Yep.
Yeah. You have a very diverse background, Chris. Tell me a little bit about you before we come on. I know we've chatted many times, Chris, and what's it's the enigma of life, I guess, is the puzzle, the mystery seeking, Chris. It's obviously alluring to anybody that's a kind of awake and aware, but when does this start for you, Chris?
Well, to be honest, I can't really remember a time when I wasn't interested in the paranormal. Mm. I grew up in a house in London that was haunted. Mm. And, my sister had a lot of viewings and a lot of sightings of ghosts.
Wow.
Yeah. And then, I remember I'll give you just one example. It was my second birthday, and I've still got the pictures of, I had a big cake in the shape of a 2. And I remember my mum taking me into the kitchen, sitting me down on the kitchen cabinet, and there was an African man in a striped blazer, very smart, very, very smart, wow, with a straw boater and a bow tie and white trousers and white shiny leather shoes, standing in the corner of our kitchen. And I remember, I was 2 years old. I said, "Look, Mum, there's a black man in the kitchen." Wow. And, obviously there was nothing there, but I could see him, and he was smiling, but he was staring straight ahead. And when I looked back, he'd gone. And I always remembered that, and I always thought, well, that is a very strange experience, and to see, when I was growing up at that time, you had people from all over the British Empire coming to London to live in London, including, people from Jamaica and Antigua and from Africa. But really, to be honest, at that time and in that part of London, there wasn't really anyone from any of the overseas territories or anyone from the British Empire living in our part of London. And so to see that particular type of character was, not only was it strange, but it was also, ethnically, it's a weird thing to see. Mm-hmm. Well, I didn't realize what that was until many years later. Mm-hmm. And I was researching the life of a really very, very influential occultist. He was a full-time magician. His name was MacGregor Mathers, and he was a member of the Golden Dawn, which is it's a very kind of well-heeled, rich people. They've had a lot of famous members. Bram Stoker, who wrote Dracula, was a member of the Golden Dawn, and the entire society was kind of sabotaged and taken over by Aleister Crowley. Now, a lot of the Golden Dawn members were also Freemasons. Mm-hmm. And, they had a center that was in London, and they were meeting at a big Freemason Centre, which is the Grand Lodge of England, which is in Queen Street near Drury Lane. But they also had a kind of initiation centre in Paris. So I was, writing, and I was researching my first film in the series of films I've been making since 2007 called Spirit World. I'd come back from Paris, and I'd gone to the house where MacGregor Mathers used to live, and he was a curator at a museum in London called Horniman's Museum. It's a very strange museum. It's a collection that spans across many things. They've got giant spiders. Wow. They've got stuffed walruses, which are 12 feet tall. They've got the biggest collection of ethnomusicology musical instruments from all over the world. They've got Tibetan nose flutes and, gamelans from Indonesia and all this kind of weird stuff there. But because he was a member of the Golden Dawn, he also used the budget of Horniman's Museum to actually buy a huge amount of voodoo and black magic equipment directly from tribal people all over the planet.
Wow.
And I was going up the stairs in the museum and going up to the top floor where they have the top floor display. And there was the black man with the straw hat, in the blazer, with the white shiny shoes and the white trousers.
Wow.
And he was a dummy, and he was part of a voodoo altar that had actually been purchased back in Victorian times. And it's been on display there for many, many years. And he is what's known as a loa. A loa is a voodoo spirit. And they come in all shapes and sizes. There's male ones, there's female ones. Some of the spirits are very boisterous, and they possess people. And when they've got possession of a human body, they're actually smoking cigars, drinking rum. They're swearing. They want sex with everyone. Doesn't matter whether it's a man or a woman.
Wow.
These spirits, I mean, sometimes they're called orishas. There's lots of different names for different types of spirits in the world of voodoo. And so, that had a big effect on me, because I realized that when I was 2 years old, back in a house in London, that was a voodoo spirit that had come to my house.
Hey, Chris, I used to live in Bromley, and I used to cycle when I was doing my master's in engineering and research science and society. I did 2 masters, and I spent 3 years in Bromley. And I loved it there, but I used to cycle past the Horny Man Museum all the time. I used to cycle in by Beckingham and up by the Horny Man and Dulwich.
Yeah.
And I kept swearing every day I'd go in there. Now I want to go. I want to go check this place out. But I used to cycle past it every day. It's probably one of the only museums I haven't been to in London. But I got so much to talk about, Chris. Wow, that's really fascinating. I guess that's really going to open up the portal for mysteries for you. I guess I want to focus on megalithic mysteries, I guess, towards the end of the show today. But I know we've got some really, really fascinating updates to come through. And I know you, just like me, Chris, you've got so many diverse subjects that you research. Let's roll out with just a little roundtable of exciting discoveries.
Well, the reason I did bring up voodoo is because voodoo, and I know there's a lot of people who don't like me saying this, but this is the absolute truth. Voodoo is a form of shamanism.
Oh, yeah.
And, I know that there's ladies who wear caftans and they've got posters of rainbow-coloured dolphins on their walls, and they call themselves shamans, and they live in Sedona. And when I say, well, voodoo, where they're cutting the heads off of goats and they're drinking blood, that is also shamanism. They go, oh, no, it's not shamanism, it is.
It's not all pink rainbows and blue elephants, there is some weird, sinister stuff to shamanism, and it's like brushed under the carpet. It's all supposed to be hippy-dippy in the Western world, but it's not. In the reality of where the shamanism cultures are.
Yeah.
Chris, I want to talk. Let's jump into Teotihuacan, if that's the pronunciation.
Yeah, absolutely.
There's underground discoveries there, Chris.
Yes, there are. Yeah.
Let's get into this stuff. This is incredibly exciting.
Yeah, well, I've got a fleet of drones, and I've been into drone photography, since really basically drones came of age and they were easy to fly. And I've gone for having very, very small drones because I've realized that this, I'm talking about really small drones with HD cameras, the size of a butterfly. They are much better for our type of filmmaking with ancient archaeological sites, because usually there's nooks and crannies and stuff, and the big drones can't get in there. But with the little drones, you can actually release them. Also, they fly a lot longer because they're not using so much battery juice.
Yeah, for the power and the weight. And like me, you wouldn't crash them into tunnels when you're trying to drive them through like I did last week. Like I did last week.
You do crash them. You crash them a lot. And, you do lose quite a lot of drones when you go on expeditions. But, I mean, that's just the name of the game.
Yeah.
That just goes with the territory. There's no way you can get around it. But now what we've got is we've got this new generation of crawler. These are micro crawlers, and they are all-terrain robots. They don't use caterpillar tracks. They've got like 6 legs.
Spider legs.
They're like spider legs. They're very, very tiny. They're very lightweight. They're very, very economical in terms of their battery juices. And really, basically, we've had a huge number of fantastic, mind-blowing discoveries in Mexico using a combination of the micro flying drones, the micro crawlers, and then there's these hybrid bots as well.
Wow.
They're crawlers, but they can also take off and fly. And then they can land and crawl and then fly, land and crawl and then fly. So this kind of technological advancement has already, talk about the textbooks having to be rewritten. What we have in Teotihuacan is we have a time capsule that's now been excavated. It's in a tunnel. It's underneath the Pyramid of the Sun.
Sure.
And it is a time capsule that was placed there. We think at the moment that it was placed there by the Aztecs. And you have objects that have been placed there which span a time frame all the way from the Upper Paleolithic all the way up to the point where basically the Aztec Empire was, really basically finished off, invaded, it was corrupted. You've got 3 great phases in the recent history of Middle America, Mesoamerica. You've got the Aztecs, the Mayans, and the Olmecs. The Mayan, that is such a tragedy because the Mayans, they had a language, they had the hieroglyphic writing system, and essentially they were all murdered. We're talking about genocide of the Mayan culture by the invading Spanish and by the invading Portuguese. Essentially, if they spoke Mayan or they were caught writing Mayan hieroglyphs, they were killed.
Yeah. What about, they were also conquered by other, like the Toltecs. They came in and they pretty much subjugated. Yeah. I think they subjugated them, and somehow they get branded as the baddies where their ritual and sacrifice, but that may have been an influence from Toltecs.
You can see in Mel Gibson's film Apocalypto that there was a huge cachet in going off and capturing, people, enslaving them, and we're talking about blood ritual cultures. All right. And that's why I did actually start the show talking about voodoo, because voodoo, shamanism, and blood ritual, even though this is a subject which you rarely see any reference to it in any of these museums, we know now that the Aztecs, the Mayans, and most probably the Olmecs as well, these are life force, blood ritual based shamanic cultures. And what we find with the time capsule that's been discovered in the tunnel is artifacts that go way back to the Upper Paleolithic. For example, flint spearheads, which are Stone Age implements. These are mixed in with really finely carved limestone and granite statues of individuals that look like sitting Buddhas. They have Oriental features. We can see over and over again with the Olmec culture, which is a culture that it was really at its zenith point around 1600 BC. We can see that there are African Negroid facial features with the large Olmec stone heads.
Oh, yeah.
But at the same time, the smaller Olmec statues and the Olmec masks, which are made from jade, are more Polynesian, Oceania, Japanese, Chinese in terms of their facial features. And so this time capsule, which we believe has been put together by the Aztecs and placed under and buried deliberately underneath the Great Pyramid at Teotihuacan, is really the Aztecs' way of, like we make time capsules to this day. I mean, there's modern time capsules being made right now. There's several companies around the planet, and they've made a time capsule that's, it spans 22, 23, 24,000 years.
Wow.
And this has been found using these tiny, tiny robots. The most successful robot is called Tlilok. Tlilok.
That's T-L-A-L-O-K?
T-L-I-L-O-K. And that's a crawler. But there's also these micro flyers as well, these micro drones. And then, like I say, we've also got these hybrid ones now. They look like little motorbikes, but they've got propellers on them. And, like I say, the smaller they are, the better they are for getting through nooks and crannies. So that is really, this is breaking news. This is really what's coming out of it. There are so many artifacts. We're talking about hundreds of artifacts that are being dug out and detected by the micro rovers at the moment that, you could fill a small to medium sized museum with the amount of artifacts coming out of this time capsule.
This is incredible.
There's crystals, there's stone axes, there's jade axes, there's Buddha-like figurines, but, and this is really, really super, super, super important. Let me just have a look at my notes here, because some of the Mexican village names are very difficult to pronounce. So I want to get the pronunciation right. Is it at Tlilapia? Hang on, let me just see.
The pronunciations of the names are crazy. But
they are. The spellings are really crazy as well. There is one place here. It's not Izapa. It could be Tlilapia. I've got it in my notes here, but basically, this is the big thing that I've discovered just recently, and I was speaking to the anthropologists and the archaeologists yesterday.
Chris, I'm looking at pictures of some of this stuff here online, and I'm telling you, I'll try and superimpose them in the video, but it's just amazing. This stuff.
Oh, it's the most
dug out of the ground. We kind of think that where it's all done and it's all been dug up, but I mean, so basically, this stuff is underneath the. This is underneath the site of Teotihuacan. So we're saying Teotihuacan was built much later than whatever this site was. This was an underground ossuary chamber, offering ritual place. Sealed off then like a time capsule. Like the megalithic chambers, they were sealed off after their use.
Yes.
Like a little time capsule, then built the pyramid over top of it.
Yes, that's right. I think that I'm making this new film, Spirit World, which I've been working on for 3.5 years, by the way. I want to say this to the listeners and the viewers, that if you want to make a kind of cinema documentary and you want to travel to a lot of these places, this is not something that you make overnight. It takes a lot of time.
If you had all the money in the world, Chris, it still takes you physical amounts of time and planning and organising.
Yeah, and also, like with the drone technology that I was mentioning, we have had, over the last 4.5 years since I've been making this movie, we have had one kind of giant digital revolution after another, after another, after another.
Oh, yeah.
Now I'm shooting on HD micro cameras. Mm-hmm. They are about the size of, like an AAA sized cylinder battery.
Wow.
And they are giving me 1080 HD.
That's amazing.
Yeah, and they're running from the flat round batteries that you put in LCD watches.
Button cells.
Yeah.
That's incredible.
Yeah. Well, they weren't around. Those cameras weren't around 2.5 years ago, and they certainly weren't around when I started making Spirit World Volume 3.
Yeah.
And then with all the drones now, I mean, we've now got these new hybrid drones which fly and crawl. These are brand new out on the market.
The drone technology, as great as it is, we're going to be under attack with that pretty soon. As I know, one was taken down at Heathrow.
Yeah.
And I reckon, I know, you know where I live in Northern Ireland, it's a bit political here, but they don't want drones here either, trust me.
No, that's right. I mean, they're already, the Netherlands authorities are training eagles to actually attack drones.
That's incredible.
Yeah. But obviously, you know, for ancient archaeological sites, as long as you've got the permission, you should be okay with them.
Okay.
But, the really big find, and this is the thing that yesterday I put a professor from the National Museum of Baghdad in Iraq in touch with a team member at Teotihuacan. Now, I met this professor from Iraq in the Pyramid of Menkaure in Egypt.
Wow.
And, you know, to be able to put these people together, I think is the most important thing, because it's not being done by standard academia.
Yeah.
Basically, these people are only comparing their notes and only finding out about each other's discoveries through me making my movie. And what we've found now is we've found Ogdoad clay figurines in Mexico, which are facially almost identical to what we have with the Ubaid culture, which is a famous culture that buried artifacts in a sacred mound of earth. And they were called the Ubaid people in southern Iraq.
You're the only other guy I know goes on about these all the time, because I'm talking the same. I know they're on your homepage as well. If you go to ChristopherEverard.com, the listeners will check it out there. But these are just mind-blowing, bizarre, weird, exotic. But they're some of the deepest antiquity of relics we have. I think 4,200 or 4,600 BC.
The Iraqi ones, they're around 5,000 years. I mean, the dates vary. And as we know, James, is that there are mistakes within academia. Okay. And I don't like the thing where, you know, people they write a textbook. The textbook goes into the curriculums in various universities, and that becomes the date set in stone, because we can see that these cultures don't arrive and then disappear in a spike in time. They overlap each other. They kill each other out. They're in competition with each other. Sometimes they join together. Sometimes they interact and mate with each other and create a synthesis culture, which we can't tell the difference of.
Complexities are mind-bending. We are a species that is extremely convoluted in everything we do, and it's never been any other way. And I don't know why archaeology's got to look back and give a very simple answer, a simple timeline or a simple set of events, when it never ever has been that way. It's not us, it's not the human race.
Yeah, I have to say, you know, in the process of making my documentaries, I've got less and less respect for, you know, traditional academia and traditional archaeology. There are museums which have artifacts on display which are so similar to other artifacts on the other side of the planet and also come from a very similar time frame that it is a crime. It's a virtual crime that the curators have not done their homework, because now let me just explain the Ogdoad. The Ogdoad are the creator gods. They created through willpower, and the Greek word for willpower is thelema. They created the modern hydrocarbon society, which is the result of mankind. Modern Homo sapien man, Homo erectus, Neanderthal, Cro-Magnon, everything that you consider to be modern man and not a monkey was created by the Ogdoad gods in the legends which we find in the Temple of Unas near the stepped pyramid of Djoser in Egypt. That's where the first creation myths of the Ogdoad were recognized.
And that's that word again, Og, the Og, or the Og. It's everywhere. It's even in Ireland, Chris.
Yeah, Ogdoad, it's been named that because there was 8 of them. There were 4 serpent-headed females who have the bodies of human Homo sapien females, but with the heads of serpents. And they married 4 humanoid men, but those men have the heads of amphibian kind of frogs or salamanders. And so what they represent the 3 primary and most successful strands of evolutionary DNA: amphibian, reptilian, mammalian, all combined together. That's really what the symbology of the Ogdoad are. And where they came from is a complete mystery. In the Egyptian legends, they were said to dwell in the ocean of Nun, which is the primordial soup, which is written into these ancient creation myths of Egypt. I mean, that there in itself is mind-blowing.
This is Gnostic teachings as well. This migrates into the Gnostic teachings, yeah?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it's mind-blowing because, modern science now recognizes that amoebas is really basically where we came from. We came from a primordial soup, and that is written into these ancient Egyptian creation myths, which are inscribed in hieroglyphs in stone at Saqqara.
Wow.
Thousands of years ago, they knew that we came from a primordial soup or a primordial ocean, which they called the Ocean of Nun. Now, the Ogdoad gods, the 4 humanoid females with the heads of serpents and the 4 male humanoids with the heads of frogs, they somehow inhabited this primordial soup, or their souls inhabited this primordial ocean. And through their willpower, they created the first fully formed human, Ra, or Atan Re, however you want to pronounce it. And what happened is that through their willpower, they made this primordial ocean recede away, and a small, tiny hillock of dry land, the first dry land on our planet, emerged from this primordial ocean. And on that little piece of land, a egg appeared, a flower grew out of the egg, the petals of the flower opened, and inside the flower there was the first fully formed humanoid. That's basically the creation myth. Okay?
Wow.
Now what we find is that when we look at the Sumerian cuneiform and the Assyrian library of Nineveh, we can see that the Anunnaki are really, you can transpose the Anunnaki onto the Ogdoad. You can see that there are massive similarities going on with the epic tales of Gilgamesh and the writings which were unearthed by Sir Henry Rawlinson at the Library of Nineveh. And all of that stuff, by the way, is in London. They actually brought back the entire temple room and rebuilt it at the British Museum, which is pretty mind-blowing.
Yeah, I've been to the British Museum in excess of 200 times. I used to go once a week for my when I was over in the corner, and I have lots of it on film as well. I'm going to put that up on the channel sometime.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm going to be actually in the Pergamon Museum in Berlin next week as well, Chris.
Yes, they've got a great collection as well.
And I just came back from the Louvre in Paris, and between those 3 museums, they have massive chunks of Sumeria. In one way,
they do, yeah.
In one respect, it's great that it's preserved. It is.
It is really, because, we've had this incredible situation with ISIS or whoever they are. I mean, I don't believe that, ISIS really does exist as the way the mainstream media tells us they exist, but they've been defacing the winged bull statues. They're called shedu. And Babylon, the word Babylon means gate of the gods. And, the big cities in Sumeria or Mesopotamia had these shedu, winged bull statues at the entrances of the big cities like Mosul, Basra, Baghdad. And, these things are being destroyed. They're destroying them because they're saying that the spirits, the jinn, actually live inside them, which I can well believe. But, that's a job for an exorcist, not for a bloke with a Black & Decker power drill.
Sure. Before I don't want to lose your train of thought, by the way, in your book, Stone Age Psychedelia, Chris, you've got a whole chapter on the Ogdode and hallucinogenic magic. Maybe you just want to explain the hallucinogenic magic element to the Ogdode.
Right, okay. Well, communication with the Ogdode is the number one game in town for a lot of these cults, a lot of these secret societies. The most famous network of secret societies or brotherhoods, which we had, that were trying to make contact with the Ogdode all the time, are the pharaohs. The pharaohs, and I'm talking about dynastic Egypt, were using hashish, which was mostly coming from the area which is now called Lebanon. That was a very light-colored kind of sandy, fluffy type hashish, but they were also getting a more oily kind of substance from Pakistan, believe it or not.
Wow.
And they were also ingesting other types of resin that was being manufactured in Syria. So they were eating cannabis resin. They were also using opium, and all ancient cultures have been using opium. Opium has a history which goes back at least 5,750 years. The so-called incense burners that you see carved into the walls at the Palace of Karnak in Luxor, they are not incense burners. They are opium pipes. And not only can you see the opium pipes, and they look very similar to the ancient Chinese opium pipes, but you can see the vapors in some of the carvings coming out, and it's in those vapors that the visions of the gods could be seen.
Wow.
So they had cannabis resin, they had opium, and we also know that the Magi, who are in today's world the Bedouin and the Berbers, the Magi, who were like, in the legends of the Nativity, the three wise men, bringing myrrh and, all the gifts for Jesus. The Magi are the Stone Age drug peddlers of the ancient world. And you had obviously gold, and you had obviously turquoise, and you had obviously jade, and these valuable semi-precious and precious stones and metals in the ancient world, no question about it. But when we really look at what people were really trading with currency and what was the goods that were traveling huge distances with the Magi trade routes, it was the psychedelics, the psychoactive roots, the psychoactive seeds like henbane, mandrake root, the fly agaric mushroom, which is the typical red and white toadstool that you see in Alice in Wonderland. This was the main game in town. You could have as much gold as you wanted, as much turquoise and as much jade, but that would not give you the psychoactive telepathic effect of being in this psychedelic hypnotic trance. And that's what these brotherhoods wanted, and that's what they did all the time. And they were using a huge number of different plants. Syrian rue, which is an analog and is very similar to ayahuasca.
Ayahuasca, yeah.
Yeah.
I think they actually make a brew out of that in this part of the world, Chris, and they call it anahuasca. Yeah, they use the Syrian rue as a derivative for the DNA.
Yeah. Yeah, well, Syrian rue, it's a two-part thing. It's an MAO inhibitor. It's a two-part thing. It's exactly the same as they use Psychodria vigris along with ayahuasca and tobacco leaves in the Amazonian region to actually create a catalytic kind of process that allows the DMT to last in the body, because otherwise, if you don't do that, it just gets digested. The same thing was going on in the Middle East.
Wow.
Exactly the same thing. Now, if you take a look at you really carefully look, and you go to the National Museum of Cairo, or you go to the Luxor Museum, take a look at the eyes in a lot of those solid gold death masks. The Egyptian elite were employing high-level priestesses and priests. These people were permanently on a whole calendar kind of schedule of feasts, rituals, and ceremonies. And at every single one of these ceremonies, there would be a ritual which would involve psychoactive plants, psychoactive incenses, opium, hashish, tobacco, and we know, and you can see this in my book, Stone Age Psychedelia, we have absolute incontrovertible proof that the pharaohs, especially King Ramesses II, was ingesting cocaine.
Mind blown.
Yeah. Now, the cocaine plant and the tobacco plant, there is no botanical, historical evidence of those plants ever being in the Middle East. So we know that there were trade routes between North America, which is where the tobacco has been used by the Hopi, Cree, Apache, Blackfoot, all of those indigenous North American tribal nations use a combination of tobacco and sage as part of their form of shamanism. When you go further south and you go into Mesoamerica, you then start getting into countries like Colombia and Peru, and that's where the coca plant, the leaves are chewed, and that gives you this staying power and the wide awake kind of attitude which is necessary for these long rituals. Those plants were taken to Egypt for sure.
Yeah, okay, so they're indigenous to South America only, but that implies, well, either the South Americans went to Egypt or the Egyptians went to South America, or there was a trade route where it got passed along A, B, C, D, and whatever got to there. But most likely, I think there was transoceanic contact. We have many other examples, like you say, the statues, different parts of the world all linking up. You have Brazilian, Phoenician writings in Brazil and stuff. Maybe the Phoenicians, the Phoenicians were importers.
Well, the Phoenicians, we know that the Phoenicians and the Assyrians, they monopolized cannabis resin trading all the way over the ancient world. I mean, they were trading up into the Adriatic, Albania, Greece, Macedonia, Italy. The portion of the south of France where I live actually was under the control of Italy. Actually, it wasn't France. That's a recent kind of political development in the last couple of centuries. But that cannabis resin, and also the fluffy dry stuff from Lebanon, that was being traded all over. And then from the Celtic Empire, we had mandrake and henbane. A very, very difficult plant to cultivate, by the way, mandrake. It's incredibly difficult, but it's in the Book of Genesis. The very first thing that you read in the Book of Genesis is that mandrake was being taken as an aphrodisiac.
Wow.
Now, the Book of Genesis, with the whole story of, God said then there was light, and then he separated the waters from the heaven, blah, 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 blah. That is based on the ancient Gilgamesh epics from ancient Sumeria or ancient Mesopotamia.
It's one of my favourite epics, actually, that and the story of Utnapishtim, and it's just Some of the stuff in the Sumerian records, the
Yeah.
quote mythologies, it sounds wild, but
Yeah.
this stuff may be in fact, for all we know. It's just a label. Mythology is just a label. For something
Yeah.
that's not
Now,
understood.
if we want to talk a little bit about the Anunnaki and the genetic manipulation of humankind and the creation of humankind, what I mean by that is the basic genetic building blocks of the very, very primitive man, sorry, I have trouble with some of these Latin names. Australopithecus.
Yeah, understand, bro. It's the
Yeah, these are the African skulls. They've only been found in fragments. They're very, very thick skulls. They are more advanced than a chimpanzee skull, more advanced than a gorilla skull, but they're not so thin and as evolved as Cro-Magnon. And so that is a branch of half man, half monkey, which died out or was killed off. And we can see these being dug up in South Africa. Okay, they probably exist in Australia as well, but that's another thing. Now, what we can see is that all of a sudden there is this massive, inexplicable jump, like somebody's got into Doctor Who's TARDIS, and we've gone from monkey man to virtually modern man in the flick of an eye. And this is still inexplicable. It's still something that the official textbooks from academia dodge this subject.
Yeah, it's like we have this compartmentalized research of our history and culture, and it's all this is taboo and this one isn't, but it's still in the record. Yeah. You can ignore it all you want. There's some really weird stuff in a record, and it's like we have this ostracization of our history where, oh, I don't like it, stick your head in the sand. Sorry.
Yeah. Well, this hole or this gap in the evolutionary story of mankind is filled as long as you start taking into account the Ogdode, as long as you start taking into account the Anunnaki and the advanced beings like Quetzalcoatl coming from nowhere, or the Viracocha who appear from nowhere, or the great teacher, the great Wangina in the Aboriginal Dreamtime mythology. They came from nowhere. They knew about mathematics. They knew about astronomy. They knew about astrology. They knew about textiles. They knew about weaving. They knew about cultivating wheat, barley, other grains. They knew about making poultices. They knew about psychoactive herbal concoctions like ayahuasca, like Syrian rue mixed with mint. These great world teachers, the nomos, they go under many, many different names in many different cultures. They plug this gap in the evolutionary timeline. But traditional academia is, in a controlled environment. It's under the control of universities, university dons. A lot of them have been members of these brotherhoods and sisterhoods and Freemasonry. And what I'm talking about is what people pay thousands of pounds to learn when they get initiated into witch cults, Masonic brotherhoods, and other kind of weird cults.
I'm glad you mentioned the nomos there. I just want to bring in the work of Shannon Doherty and Laird Scranton, both Dogon researchers, and they talk the Dogon culture in Western Africa. They talk about the nomos being their semi-aquatic fish gods, very, very like the Ogdode. These figurines and from the Ubaid, it's just the same kind of things, different ends of the earth and. But I don't know if you've ever interviewed Shannon. She's very hard to get a hold of, and I don't think she does many interviews. But she has produced a prolific body of research, as has Laird. And Laird, Mr. Laird Scranton is coming all the way from New York to Avesbury. We're going to do a conference there. And that's on the Megalithic Odyssey I was telling you at the start of the show, Chris. So I'm really excited about that. I hope you're going to come to the event anyway. You have an open.
Is it August the 20th?
August 20th, yeah.
I'm actually going to be
probably somewhere else in the world.
I'm going to be filming. I'm going to be doing a whole load of filming about the Knights Templar at that time, the whole of August, because I'm doing this film about the Baphomet, which is this being that was worshipped by the Knights Templar.
Yeah.
So I've put August aside to get that film done.
I've got an interesting thing for you. I'll share with you off air, Chris. You're going to love it.
Okay.
Because nobody else in the world has it, and you're going to be giving it for free. So, because I want somebody to do something with the research, and it's a bit bizarre to say the least. Right. To say the least, and it'll probably fit in with that little bit of filming. But I wish you. Where are you going for that, by the way? Where's that on the?
I'm going to be filming in Andorra, in Spain, in France. I'm going to be filming in Sardinia, and also northern Italy as well.
When are you in Sardinia?
In August. I don't know exactly which day because I'm going to go in my Range Rover and go on ferries.
Oh, nice. If you're in early August, let's meet up. Otherwise,
yeah, I like Sardinia. I think it's an amazing place. I've been
there. I mean, I think I've discovered some hypogeums there. They're off the beaten track. They're just left open to the elements. They're like the
hypogeum. Oh, that's great. Well, I'm going to be taking my Range Rover, so if we meet up, we can drive everywhere.
We've got to do some exploring together, bro.
Yeah, absolutely.
In Sardinia, I found there was a acoustic reverberation, about 7 seconds in there, and they've cut the same acoustic doorways as they did to the entrance to the temples in Malta. It's very, very similar stuff. Absolutely amazing.
Wow.
Sardinia is untapped. I mean, I'm hopefully doing the tour there this October, but in terms of megalithic, it's on steroids. I mean, it's the Naraji Towers are like a mixture between a castle and a megalithic monument. But they're not castles, but I mean, they're like just insane. I mean, some of the constructions over there are absolutely jaw-dropping. I mean, and Sardinia, I don't know if they appreciate what they have or it's a very, very poor part of the Italian Empire.
Oh, tell me about it. I was actually going to move to Sardinia about maybe 15 or 20 years ago. This is, just at the point where the internet was starting. And one of the things that made me not go there is because it was so primitive.
Yeah, they're so back.
And it was one of the last places where we had really fast Wi-Fi.
Yeah, I mean, the roads, networks over there are so...
Oh, man, you can't go anywhere in a normal car, really.
Yeah, it's
well, you can nowadays, but I mean, 20 years ago, yeah.
Not even now. I mean, some of the roads we went down, it was just nothing but they weren't even roads. They were like tracks. They're like something you see in Peru or something. And this is European zone. This is the Eurozone.
Yeah. I have to say that, I think even Austria was considered a third world country right up until 1969.
Yeah.
Because their economy had been damaged, by a history of Hitler and all this kind of thing. I mean, Europe, it's only in the last 10, 12, 15 years that it's become modernized.
Yeah, well, that's true. And with respect to Sardinia, I mean, I think they're sitting on a gold mine as well, Chris. I think they are just literally, sitting on a gold mine of megalithic. And Corsica too, about some of the best megalithic stuff that we have. Because I think they morphed and they changed, just like the Irish stuff over here. I mean, some of the oldest stuff here is 5400 BC in the northwest of Ireland. But then we had a wave of 3500 to 3000 BC. And then it kind of phased out about 1000 BC. But in Sardinia, again, they have some really deep antiquity stuff, neighbouring Corsica as well. And it morphed into the Naraji civilization right into the Bronze Age. And it just kind of kept going where other megalithic cultures kind of died out in pockets.
Yeah.
It just kept going. And the artistic display that they have over there, they have everything from the rock art, figurines and the Naraji artifacts, rock cut tombs, although they were probably acoustic chambers, hypogeums. The Narajis are a special type of megalithic monuments with holy wells, with like moon alignments coming into them. It's insane, the stuff over there.
Yeah, I think the other thing is the reason I chose August is because there is a ferry connection to Corsica. And you can't get that ferry doesn't run in the winter.
Make it early August and I'll team up with you, bro. We'll get
Yeah,
the Megalithic
sounds
Odyssey
good.
road crew over there. We'll do something if we can.
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to go, by ferry, like I said, but I'm going to go via Corsica. So, I mean, Corsica is still a place which I need to explore.
It's a major part of the puzzle there, Chris.
My favorite thing is just walking into one of these little village museums
Exactly.
and discovering stuff that looks like, identical to something like from ancient Iraq or something like that.
Up in the northwest near Alghero in Sardinia, there's a museum called Sana, the Sana Museum. SANNA. If you get there, go in and take a chance. I actually walked into the wrong building. It was the Department of Justice, and they had like metal detectors and like machine guns and stuff like. And I was like, I was going in with my camera equipment, and they let me through. And then I said, "Which way is the exhibit?" And I went, "Oh no, this is the Department of Justice. So it's right beside each other. Don't get confused."
Wow.
But anyway, the Sana
Is it
Museum.
the museum?
Sana Museum, yeah. It's incredible. So. Why it's not in the capital Cagliari, I don't know. They just kept it made so there's a big chunk down there too. But the Sana Museum has a weird skull in there from where the rock cut tombs were, and it's got it's been operated on with trepanation.
Oh yeah,
and it's got a weird shape to the back of it. It's and it's unusually small as well. But it's like bulbous. It's like a wide wedge shape at the back. I wouldn't call it It's kind of elongated, but. It's definitely not really like us. Very, very unusual shaped skull, and it's been trepanized. It's been operated on.
Wow. Yeah, that's like the caves of Shanadar in Iraq, because, we've got elongated skulls. This is in my book, Stone-Age Psychedelia, but they also operated on whoever, they operated and the person carried on living because the bone healed after the hole had been drilled into their skull.
Wow.
Iraq is just full of these amazing things. The famous skeleton called Nandi, that's its nickname, actually has a withered arm. Now, but continued to be looked after by this community at Shanadar. Not only that, when the person was buried, they buried them with flowers. And outside the caves, they had their own medicinal garden full of ephedra and other herbs used for healing. So we're dealing with a situation right now where the traditional idea of the Neanderthal and Cro-Magnon being idiots with clubs is totally out the window.
Yeah, I know. They have this stupid picture painted for so long now. People just aren't buying it, Chris. They're not having it. They're not buying it. They don't accept it. They know it's not adding up. I mean, you wouldn't have to be too awake to realize that anyway. But I think the internet age is caught up. People can't get away with anything anymore. It's out on the internet before it's out and don't believe what you read on the TV anymore or see on the news or whatever. It's just who goes to the BBC and stuff for the news anymore. I don't know.
I did watch one of their prehistoric blockbuster documentaries about a week ago, and I was just utterly disgusted with it.
Yeah.
I mean, the people who are making these things, these documentaries, have an agenda, and they're coloring modern society into the storyline which should be based on archaeological evidence. The BBC tack is to now say that if it hadn't been for psychopaths, modern man wouldn't have survived.
What?
Yeah, and if it hadn't been for cannibalism, modern man wouldn't have survived.
That's insane.
Well, if you think about it, if everyone was a psychopath and everyone was eating each other, we wouldn't be here now, would we?
Wouldn't be much of us left. Pardon the pun.
This idea of cooperation and especially psychoactive, psychedelic, trance, self-induced hypnotic communion with spirits is so far off the official agenda. They never go there.
Yeah. Chris, we're just at the top of the hour. I'm going to take a little break there for 5 minutes and we'll be back with the second half of the show. We're going to get into more. We didn't get through half of the update, so I've got to come back in on that. And I just love the conversations with you, Chris, because they just go where they go. And I know you're a deeply intelligent guy, and you research many things. That's why I love the conversation with you. It's just like a discovery as well as an intellectual discussion as well. But take a break there, Chris. We'll be back in just a moment. Hi everybody, welcome back to Capricorn Radio TV. This is your host James, and super excited with today's guest. It's always great talking to Mr. Christopher Everard. You can check him out on his personal page, christophereverard.com, and you can check out his TV content on enigmatv.com. We're hitting everything today from ancient cultures, Sumeria, Mexico, megalithic monuments, Stone Age, psychedelia, and Chris's awesome book. I'm not sure if it's his latest book, but it's a very, very well researched and prolific book, as is Mr. Christopher Everard. And I just love the content, the way it's produced. It's well researched, well written, plenty of diagrams, images, and supporting context. That's always a good thing to read in a fact book. And Christopher does it really well. Christopher, are you back with me on the show?
I certainly am. Yep.
Great.
My latest book is actually a digital book. It's called Star Gods.
Star Gods, sorry, that's right.
Because I do physical books, but I also do digital books with, electronic word search, and you've got page gesture swipes, and, because a lot of people, they want to have something on their iPad or on their iPhone while they go to work.
Because you're not limited by the images you can put in a Kindle book or something,
Well, there you go. I mean, I do a physical book for certain types of subjects like Stone Age psychedelia. And I'm doing another physical book now, which is really containing all of the new breakthroughs which I've had with the anthropologists from Iraq, speaking with the archaeologists from Mexico.
Sure.
And I do digital books all the time. So Star Gods is my last digital book, and it's a kind of bestseller. It's a digital bestseller.
We've got to meet up at some point to discuss some of that for Megalithic Odyssey documentary, Chris. It's just a matter of when we meet, not if we meet.
Yeah, well, Star Gods is more about the Venus goddess statues which have been found all over the planet. These are very strange little figurines. Most of them are only the size of your hand. They are female figurines. They have oversized breasts and very wide hips. Well, what's really interesting is they don't have any hands. They don't have any feet. The arms are usually short stubs, and a lot of them don't have any heads.
Wow.
And the oldest one is 13,300 years. That was found in a river in Morocco. But they are actually being found now in Japan. And this is a very, very important
It's insane,
kind of
the
discovery.
diversity of where these things are. Is there not one in Vienna a lot older than that?
Yes.
I've seen one in the Vienna Museum in Austria, and there's a security guard sitting with it 24 hours a day. That's how priceless. I'm serious. It's in its own cabinet.
A Venus figurine that's older than 13,000 years.
I think it's 30,000 something.
Possibly. Possibly
There's
there
so
is.
well, there's so many of them. Let me just Venus figurine.
There's more than 125 Venus figurines in various museums around the world.
The Venus of Willendorf.
Yeah.
Again, it's 28,000 BC. They reckon.
Oh, that's 28,000. Wow.
Yeah, but this is the thing. The time frames that these are all found in are like really large epochs and very, very diverse across geographic terrains. That it's just a double enigma.
Well, they are, but my book Star Gods really goes into it. And what these figures are is that they are figurines that commemorate the genetic engineering of these kind of broodmare humanoid figures.
Breeding.
Now,
Were these breeding machines?
Yes, they were.
I think we've talked about that before.
And it sounds absolutely incredible, but when you look at the archaeological evidence, it's right there in your face.
I was doing Megalithic Odyssey in Malta, Chris, and I've been there many times anyway, but I was having a little think tank with my road crew, and I found myself again looking at the sleeping lady, as she's called, and she's very much like a Venus figurine.
Yeah.
Although she's not called a Venus figurine, she's got a nickname, the Sleeping Lady. Personally, I don't think she was sleeping. I think she was dying. I think she was dying out of existence, and was the last of a dying breed. Personally, and
that's interesting.
it's just they call it nickname the sleeping lady because she looks like she's lying down with her in the sleeping position with her hands on her two hands, the way you would lie down and sleep on your side. But I think she was lying down to die, and I think when they threw an offering into the bottom of the hypogeme in Malta, that's where this was found. Yeah. And I personally just think it was it was a disgust. That's it. It's gone now. They were just throwing the object away, going, "This is the end of an era." And it kind of puts you back that antiquity that Malta is most likely. These dates are really open to subjective criticism. And like you say, I think I've seen Venus figurines in Malta, in the Louvre and Vienna, and that's the only three that I've seen. But just in person. But I know, and I'll open it up at that again. That they're everywhere on different epochs, and it's just a double mystery.
Well, what it was is that when I sat down and started writing Star Gods, I really just started researching the Jomon culture in Japan. Now, this culture goes way back. Sure. Like, they've got earthenware pots, which were made in 14,000 BC. Now, these earthenware pots, they were actually decorated when the clay was still wet. They pressed straw rope into the clay pots. I mean, this is not a hunter-gatherer society, and yet traditional textbooks at universities would say, well, 14,000 BC, there was nothing around virtually in terms of modern technology like rope. Why did they have rope? They obviously were tethering animals with it. They were already settled. They were already making earthenware pots. They were making them so they could boil porridge, make food. They were already very advanced people, 14,000 BC.
Wow. And you mentioned a link before there again. Isn't some of the Japanese stuff like the stuff in Ecuador? It might be the Jomon figurines, I believe.
In Ecuador, I'd have to look that up. I mean, there are. What I was going to say to you, James, is that
I've never researched it myself, but I know I think some other people have made that claim that some of the Jomon stuff is incredibly like Ecuadorian.
Yeah. Well, what I was going to say is that in terms of Japan and China, because that was a kind of combined culture, they were borrowing off of each other. There was a huge amount of ancient trade between Japan and China. And the two cultures really amalgamated. They only really became an isolated culture as far as Japan is concerned at the time of the samurai. So that's about 1,100 years ago. They kind of split away from China. But before then, in the ancient times, they were trading with each other.
Wow.
And what we can see is that the whole of Oceania was actually their trading kind of backyard. Sure. You can see Oriental influences all around the planet as long as you've got the eyes open to see them when you go into certain museums. If you go to the Ivory Coast in Africa and you go to a place, Gabon, Gabon, you can see ceremonial voodoo masks which are identical to kabuki masks.
Wow.
And this shows you that there was an Oriental trade route coming from Southeast Asia. It was stretching all the way over into the Middle East and then dipping down into the northern Sahara and going across into the Ivory Coast.
Chris, we need more people like you out there, brother. We need more people like you looking at all of this stuff. It's such a very wide. I mean, but we're in the driving seat. I mean, we have information at our fingertips. All we've got to do is research and put it together. It's all sitting there ready for people. It's just
absolutely,
and there's so much of it. It's not like a competition. There's just so much of it.
Yeah, absolutely. So. With Star Gods, when I started writing that book, I was really interested in these Venus figurines. Why did they not have any hands? Why did they not have any feet? And why did some of them not have any heads? What happened is I reread the Epic of Gilgamesh. I reread the Ogdoad creation myths from the Temple of Unas, Saqqara. And I realized that if the legends of the Anunnaki or the star gods was true, and that they'd actually come down from the stars and they'd interacted with monkey men. I don't really like that phrase, but I mean, you know, it sums it up.
Yeah.
And that they actually kick-started Homo sapien and created this spark, this gap, which is in all of the official textbooks of how is it that we've got these broken cul-de-sac branches of human evolution in South Africa with the monkey men who evolved into nothing. And there is no explanation of why they ended that evolutionary branch. Then all of a sudden there's a gap. Then bang, Cro-Magnon and Neanderthal man are everywhere, Homo erectus and an Homo sapien. It's like, you know, it's like jumping from designing an old Citroen 2CV, you know, one of those weird cars that the French farmers drive, to having a Bugatti Veyron.
Wow.
With nothing in between. All right, that is really what the textbooks are telling us. Well, that gap is filled by the Anunnaki, by the Nomos, by the interaction of, you know, the world teachers. You know, most of the legends say they came from the stars. In Mali and in the Congo, in Africa, they say they came from the sea. Okay, well, that is very, very similar to the amphibian aspect of the Ogdode.
Sure.
Now, if you really think about the nuts and bolts process, how would you take those monkey men that were spread all over sub-Saharan Africa? We know that because we've got their skull fragments in the museums. How would you physically manage that if you were a star god coming from the Pleiades or somewhere else? You would have to have an intermediary genetic sausage factory where you would have a process of trial and error. You would genetically modify the human egg. You would genetically splice the sperm, and you would actually have, like I say, a genetic sausage factory situation. That is what these Venus figurines are. They are showing that there were humanoid sausage factory brood mares. Many of these figurines have vertical lines down their stomachs because they weren't giving birth normally. There was a cesarean intersection done to extract the fetus by these star gods, and it all fits together. If you want to look at it carefully, it's the most logical solution. And these legends, we find them in Mali, the legends are in the Congo, the legends are in Japan, the legends are in Iraq, the legends are in Egypt. And the missing part of the jigsaw puzzle, which I had missing up until a few days ago, was where was the this idea of the great world teachers coming from nowhere, maybe coming from the stars, and genetically engineering and kickstarting modern mankind in Mexico? Where was that in terms of the American cultures? And I found it. And I found it in a little village museum in a place called Tlatelolco in Mexico.
Wow.
And there they have the figurines. Dozens upon dozens upon dozens upon dozens of figurines. And as you probably know, James, not very well labeled. These figurines, some of them are identical to the Dogu figurines that you get from the Jomon people in Japan.
Wow.
Some of them look like the figurines that you get from Iraq. And you see elongated headed men who are alien looking with erect penises inserted into another figurine, which is your typical Venus goddess figurine with no head, stubby arms, no feet.
Wow.
And that is what you're seeing. Now, if you don't go along this route, and normal academia is ignoring this, how do you explain the vast quantity of these figurines, and why were these figurines buried in sacred mounds of earth? It doesn't add up. The only thing that adds up is when you take into account Gilgamesh, the pyramid texts, the creation myths of the Ogdode, and the myths of the Nomos with the Dogon people in Mali. When you take that into account, everything falls into place. These figurines are telling us what happened. It's not a nice thing that happened, but basically these beings interacted with monkey men. They had a whole process of trial and error that resulted in various versions, version 1, version 2, version 3 of modern man, which was Cro-Magnon, Neanderthal, Homo erectus, Homo sapien, and Homo sapiens sapiens. And so that's really what my film partly is about, that I'm doing right now, but it's also about the communication systems that were used in the ancient world using these psychoactive herbs. I know this sounds crazy, but shamanism and voodoo is the baseline from which all the great religions came from. And these teachings, or the base teachings of shamanism, were what those world teachers, or those star gods, whatever you want to call them, gave mankind. And it was all based on genetics. It was all based on blood sacrifice and teaching that the life force is contained in the blood. And that was the teaching that is the common thread from the Mayans to the Aztecs to the Babylonian, Chaldean cultures in Mesopotamia, and you also see it in the Oriental world as well.
Do you think, Chris, perhaps, when you look at your Stone Encyclopedia book, do you think that's why we're accessing these entities in the etheric realm? Is because that's how we're able to access them? We're genetically linked with them?
Yeah, I mean, ayahuasca is a really, that is a very important key in the Middle America and Latin America geographical area. You have an analog of that, which is the use of Syrian rue in the Middle East. DMT, in terms of in Egypt, the DMT was being extracted from bulrushes and from the blue lily of the Nile. Essentially, the common denominator that we see across all of these different cultures and all these different eras of time is DMT.
Wow.
DMT from the lily, DMT from the bulrush, DMT from ayahuasca, DMT from Syrian rue. DMT is the key. DMT is the telepathic secret lever to putting yourself into a self-hypnotic trance, which opens up your landscape of your inner mind to having open communion with these non-physical entities.
I don't know how long we got for the second hour, Chris, but I just want to get slugged through some stuff and some. I know you brought. I'm just going to jump to the Jaguar statue of Germany.
Okay, yeah.
You sent me this. I wasn't even aware of this. I think this thing is incredible, and I'm kind of glad, because we're kind of going on a very, very Paleolithic theme today, where this is really deep antiquity stuff, and I think that's great. I think that's great about the research now, is that we're past that stupid 3000 BC window where the origins of civilization was 3000 BC and
ridiculous.
Nothing existed before it, and everything else before that is called prehistory, and it didn't exist. So I think we're past that now, and we're just talking epochs that were unheard of 20 years ago.
Well, the Jaguar statue, I mean, when I first discovered that back in 2008, it was so shocking to me. I was in Germany. I was visiting the Egyptology collection in Berlin, and I went traveling around different towns in Germany. And this wooden statue, which is the body of a man, but with the head of a jaguar, immediately hit me that this is something that is an experience which many people report on ayahuasca. And it is something that you can see in the great cultures of Mexico. In the Yucatan Peninsula, you have these stone carvings where you've got like a jaguar, big cat with its mouth open, and inside this mouth is the head of a man. And of course, this has, great resonances with shamanism and with the spirit world. What we see in ancient Egypt is that we see shape-shifting going on where a great pharaoh dies. He's obviously got a human body when he dies. But when his spirit, his Ka, transcends into the spirit world, he has a different form. He might have a body of a man still, but he has the head of a ram. That's just one example. These jaguar-headed humanoids are one of the most archetypal, common entities that people report when they see visions on ayahuasca. You have serpents that speak to you. You have the jaguar-headed men, and then you also have the bird-headed men as well, who are pretty heavyweight dudes. Most of the time, anyone that comes across these bird-headed men is they're pretty stern characters. They say, "We rule this planet. You are just here as a visitor, and you watch yourself because we're the bosses." This is the type of message that a lot of people get, and they're very shocked by it.
Sure.
But when you look at ancient Egypt, look at the great Thoth. Thoth is an ibis-headed human man in the pantheon of great entities and gods and beings, whatever you want to call them, in ancient Egypt. So we can see now that there are great concordances. We've got the internet, we've got global communication. We are putting together now, finally, independently of the strictures of academia, the true history of how we are, how we got to where we are now, and what the Aztecs, the Mayans, the Olmecs, the Jomon people, the Dogon, what they were all up to. And this idea that Columbus, it's this ridiculous idea that the Americas had not been traveled to before the era of the Portuguese and the Spanish conquistadors is ridiculous. It is so ridiculous. Wow. Look at those Olmec heads. They have African features very similar to the Ekinawa people in East Africa. However, some of the Olmec heads, they're more kind of like the Polynesian Maori type people. Now, when you look at the trade winds around the planet, and you look at them with Mexico in the center of the map, you can see that if the Chinese and the Japanese combined ancient culture wanted to go to Central America, they've got two choices. They could go either via Oceania, and they could arrive on the opposite coast from Yucatan, or they could go across North Africa, down maybe into Senegal, down into Mali, leave from the Ivory Coast, go across the Atlantic, and Bob's your lobster, they'd be in the Caribbean. And I think this is really what's been going on. And the thing I would like to say to you, James, and this is something which I've just been researching now, I've been trying to get Russian space satellite images of the Chinese pyramids, because they are acknowledged by the Chinese government now. The Chinese government denied them. They put earth over those pyramids and they planted pine trees on them. Yeah. Now there is a statement, it's an official statement, and they say, well, yeah, okay, these are Z Lord tombs. Okay, so there is a statement now where they have acknowledged them. But the problem is this, is that to get really clear imagery of them, you have to go to the satellite websites. The images that I've managed to get from the Russian space satellite websites, I can tell you now, when you compare these Chinese pyramids to the Teotihuacan site, which is neither Mayan, is neither Aztec.
Sure.
This is a separate. This is a whole separate culture, by the way. A lot of people don't realize that.
Yeah.
They go to Teotihuacan, they think the Mayans built it.
Yeah, they walked in, found it, and they said that they found it, and they just adopted it.
Exactly, the same as Stonehenge. Everybody thinks that the Druids built Stonehenge. I mean, do me a favour. You know, Woodhenge and Stonehenge and Avebury, I want to say this to the listeners, we have got some bombshells coming to us because the dating of these megalithic circles is so far out, it's laughable. Personally, for me, you know, the central great big massive stone at Avebury that got smashed to pieces, that could be, you know, we could be talking about from the time of the Ice Age. You know, wow. This is really where I'm going. I think that these sites, it's ridiculous. How can you have a megalithic culture making Stonehenge and Avebury 2,450 BC virtually, you know, I mean, the distance between Wiltshire and Cairo is not a massive distance in the global perspective. And yet, this is the same time frame as the building of the Giza necropolis. I mean, it's ridiculous. Obviously, the Sphinx temple, that megalithic structure there around that Sphinx, those giant pink granite uprights, this is much older than the rest of those Giza monuments.
You know, we both made expeditions to Egypt on several occasions, Chris, and I totally agree with that. But just purely on the megalithic European stuff, and I'm glad you brought up that point because I got serious problems. I mean, let me just throw out the accepted carbon dates for sites that are kind of popular or very well known. So you have Göbekli Tepe, say 10,500 BC, 9,600 BC, whatever it is, Ice Age stuff. Then you have Karahunj in Armenia, about 7,000 BC. Then you have Karo More in Sligo, 5,400 BC. Kirkcaldo in Brittany, 4,800 BC. Then, right beside Karo More, 20 miles away, 1,500 years later, you have an identical site, 3,500 BC. And then you have this popular wave of like 2,500 BC.
Yes.
What's going on for 1,000 years? Why are we getting like... And I think the best example of that is, well, like I said, in Sligo, Carroll Moor, Carroll Keel, two megalithic tomb complexes or ceremonial complexes that have astronomical alignments to stars, constellations, same type of crystallized use of passage tombs, same alignment, same shapes, same stylistic features of engineering. 20 miles from each other, but 1,500 years apart. What happened for 1,500 years? You know, and I just think that when you carbon date something, you're only carbon dating the last time it was used.
It's ridiculous.
You're carbon dating the occupants of that monument at the time it was occupied, occupied.
Well, you know, the dating of Stonehenge is based on the fragments of organic material that were found in the Aubrey holes or in some hole near the slaughter stone. I want to say to the listeners that the Druids did not build Stonehenge. And the way that the carbon dating has been done is that, say, for example, a Druid comes along 1,000 years after Stonehenge has been built, and he has a fire, and an archaeologist in the 20th century finds a lump of the wood from that fire that the Druid had. The entire site is then dated to the time when that Druid was there. They say, oh, that's when it was built. This is nonsense. It's such idiotic nonsense. It's laughable. It really is laughable. These sites are much older.
Crazy.
Just look at them.
It's crazy.
Just look at the weathering at Avebury on those giant stones.
Yeah, we're talking long epochs. I mean,
Long time.
Stonehenge did have there was the foundation holes or something found in the car park. Somebody's throwing out 10,000 BC dates for that.
Yeah, absolutely. And also, we've just had the Durrington Walls discovery,
where
they buried shaped menhirs.
I was there the day they announced it. I was actually I was doing stuff at Stonehenge and Woodhenge, and I was actually at Durrington Walls the day they had announced it. And apparently they've known about that for a long time. And they have
James.
They have a program of release. They release the information like a program, knowing that it's outdated, but they won't release this until a certain date.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. They've had satellites up in space mapping the thickness of the ice caps for 20 years using ground-penetrating radar from a spaceborne satellite. They know where all the diamonds are. They know where all the gold is. They know where all the uranium is. This information is worth not billions but trillions of dollars. They know exactly what is in the ground. They've collected so much data. If they don't know that something is there, it's not because they don't have the data about it, it's because they haven't put the investment into the staff to actually analyze the data that they've collected.
Sure. You know, there's a place in Bolivia, in Tiwanaku, and there was a Polish researcher there, Arthur Poznański, and I think it's one of the great examples of archaeoastronomy, and why I love archaeoastronomy so much, because it indicates something more accurate than carbon dating. The only problem is you got to accept it. Because of the tilt of the Earth, we have the precession, well, we have precession, we also have the Chandler wobble as well, but one's a 41,000, one's 26,000. Besides that, they'll all add up to the sun being off a little bit, but not very much. I mean, we're not talking like stars being off, like 200 years the stars are off by precession. But the sun alignments were over the corners of the temple. And Poznański put a date on it at about 1700 BC, or 17,000 years. However, his accurate measurements was with strings and compass needles. So if anything, you could just refine the measurement to maybe 15,000 to 12,000, but we're still talking really deep antiquity, and we're talking that Ice Age epoch again. And I think if you're going to categorize stuff, I think around the time of the Ice Age cataclysm, that's kind of the Great Flood and all of that, I think you're looking at, you know, a wave of building after that to probably find the North Pole again, to find the tilt of the Earth again, to find the precession of the cycle and start building the body of knowledge, starting from scratch again. And I think probably lots of stuff goes back to that time frame. I
agree. Absolutely. I mean, you know, you have to go where the evidence takes you. And we, you know, with these new little robots, we're finding new artifacts all the time. And the other thing I just want to mention is that in a little museum, I've been sent images just recently. I think it's from Cholula. Cholula in Mexico, by the way, has got, apart from the Chinese pyramids, is the biggest pyramid in the free world.
Wow.
3 times the size of the Giza Great Pyramid, much bigger than the Bosnian Pyramid. It's in Cholula. It's massive. And a lot of people don't, when I say, you know, that's bigger than, you know, it's like the biggest pyramid that you can easily go and visit. People don't believe me because they've never been told that, but it's true.
Wow. It's amazing. Yeah. I got one last thing I want to mention. My part of the world, Chris, and we spoke off air about this place before, but it's just mind-bending, and I want to bring it up because we're going to have a great discussion about it. But Boa Island in County Fermanagh in Northern Ireland.
Amazing.
It's just bizarre, isn't it?
It is the most, I'll tell you now, there are certain places that you visit or certain places that you see photos of. It's like the first time you see Easter Island. It's like the first time that you really see and appreciate the size of the monuments in Egypt. Those figures in that field that are just scattered around that field in Ireland, there is something very primeval. There is something so important there, James, that once we get to the bottom of it, it will shake the world of academia.
Yeah, it's and Boa Island basically is near. It's near Lough Erne. It's on Lough Erne in County Fermanagh in Northern Ireland.
Yeah.
These strange shaped faces and stone figurines. I don't think they even really know how old this stuff is.
Well, they don't.
They're pulling figures out of
this is the
hats,
thing.
but it's deeply deep within the mythology. Boa itself comes from the Irish Boa, the Celtic goddess of war, and she's very linked with. She's kind of linked with that Ishtar figurine. She's very like that, described exactly like that. And
Wow.
the Morrigan, she took the form of a crow, and that the crow's feet of the Ishtar goddess of sex and war.
Yeah. Well, she's also linked with the witch, the horrible child abductor, child eater that was married to one of the biblical characters in the Book of Genesis.
No.
Yeah. She's also linked to that as well.
And so they both at the same time. The
Lilith.
Celtic goddess of war was Boa, and that's what Boa Island takes its name from. And she had those crows type feet. The goddess of sex and war, and that's what Ishtar is. She's shown in the British Museum in London with crow's feet, goddess of sex and war. And I'm sorry, there's just too many coincidental descriptions there.
Now, there's one thing I want to ask you, James, about these strange alien-type creatures that you see carved into churches and carved into megalithic sites in Ireland. Looks like a little grey alien. He's got a vagina and he's holding it open.
Oh, they've got a special name for them, haven't
They're
they?
called shenaligigs. Yeah.
Sheelnagigs.
Yeah. What are they?
I have no idea, but it's like provocative and weird alien stuff rolled into one. I don't know.
That shape. The ovoid shape of,
The thing is, Christianity in Ireland is bizarre. It's got so much bizarre stuff with it. Christianity in Ireland was a very bizarre, exotic thing because they tried so much to adopt the local Irish culture. That's why the Irish mythology has preserved the megalithic monuments, and not all of it. I mean, we're the only megalithic territory in Western Europe of all the megalithic domains from Scandinavia right down to the Mediterranean. We're the only ones to have a written textual mythology associated with it. And they talked about the Sidhe, and the Sidhe was a nickname for the Dinashe. Dinashe means the people of the mounds, and they just abbreviated it to the Sidhe, or the mounds people, basically. And
the mounds mean tumuli, do they?
Yes, tumuli, the people of the tumuli, basically. Yeah.
So when they say people of the tumuli, what they're really talking about, this is a very important thing, is that the tumuli represent the first piece of dry earth to emerge from the primordial ocean.
Yeah.
That's what they are.
Yeah, and they talked about those, and they talk about the entities associated with them.
They're Ogdode then. They're Ogdode. That's why they look the way they do.
Well, they talk about the two groups of people that are associated with these. The two of the Danann and the Fomorians, they were the supernaturals. There was normal people as well. The Numidians, the Caesarians, the Milesians, Gaels from Spain.
Did you say Caesarians?
The Caesarians. It's the... No, not Caesarian, like the C-section, no. Caesarians, it's a group of people that descends of Caesar.
Wow.
But all these groups of people that conquered Ireland, the Firbolg as well, the men of bags, which then you wondered, was the Firbolg like the Sumerian people with the bags of the buckets? Or the Mexican
Well, those
people
little buckets are called situlas.
Well,
and you see them in ancient Iraq, but you also see them in Mexico as well.
Mexico as well, yeah. And bizarrely that the people of the men of bags, they got wiped out. They were the ones that had the ramparts on the west of Ireland, these stone forts. But of all these groups of people that were they talked about Ireland being taken 5 times. So we have Irish mythology called the Leabhar Gall and the Heron book, which basically means the book of the taking of Ireland. And they sometimes just abbreviate that descriptive thing to the Book of Invasions, but it basically translates the Book of the Taking of Ireland. And Ireland was taken 5 times by 5 groups of people. And the last ones to take it were the Milesian Gaels, were the sons of Mil España. They came from Spain the Milesian Spanish soldiers, they came over here and they were one of the last ones to take Ireland. And we're talking deep antiquity here, not 16th century now. So we're talking deep antiquity. And they subjugated the Tuatha Dé Danann, the supernatural race, which were probably these figurine people here that we're talking about. You know, and they were and they also interbred with the Fomorian Ogs, these giants, the race of giants. And we
wow!
And when
that's like the Nephilim, then the legend of the Nephilim.
I call them the Nephilim Og or the Og Fomorians, or you can call them what you want. I mean, the Og. Here's the thing: we have Angus Mac Og, and we have the megalithic monuments got the word Og in them, especially around Stonehenge. You have Og Burn. All the
yeah, of course you do. Yeah,
all the place names in England and the towns surrounding near megaliths that all have the word Og in them. Angus Mac Og is one of the Angus son of Og. He was a supernatural Tuatha Dé Danann guy who had a father who was a Fomorian. So you can actually draw genealogy tables from the Irish mythologies because it says who was related to who married who had kids by who. They even talk about stepfathers. The Dagda, he had a stepfather who he didn't like. So we're talking about specifics here that doesn't really seem kind of godlike. It seems like more human-like or genetically. Yeah. You can able to just see, and you can see the transmutation from mythology to some sort of reality element to this. When you get into it deep enough, and even more bizarre, the Ogma, Honeymouth was his nickname. He was the guy. He was a poet, and he was the guy who founded the Irish language. The Irish language came from Ogham script, or Om. It's a silent G, so we say Om script, like the Om as in resistance, so Om script. But it's English people pronounce it Ogham, and it basically comes from Ogma, the guy who invented the Irish script, which was almost like a runic writing with dashes and like a Morse code, and that's pretty easy to decipher. We have all the Om script very, very similar, and very especially around that area in Boa Island as well.
Yeah.
Now here's the thing, and this is the clincher, Chris, and we'll kind of maybe wrap up with that, but because we're going on a crazy one here. But the Om script was converted by the Christian monks into a Latin alphabet, and so they took the oral history of Ireland and they wrote this down at a time when, you know, this stuff was like the Da Vinci science fiction, the Dan Brown Da Vinci science fiction book of the day. It was like the most ultimate science fiction you could create, or fact. You make it up, you can call it what you want, you can call it fanciful, you can call it mythology, you can call it history. These books were considered history up until the 18th century, and then they went, we don't like it, we don't believe it, it's mythology. Setting that aside, when the monks wrote this stuff down, they were trying to convert the pagans of Ireland to Christianity, and they were losing a battle because they were just dogmatic in their pagan beliefs. So they adopted so many pagan customs. They even probably took druids into the church.
Oh yeah.
And there's evidence that a lot of these church peoples, or saints that we call them, are actually probably druids that hid within the church to survive.
Absolutely.
And
absolutely.
when they wrote,
did you know that a lot of the voodoo spirits were renamed after Catholic saints, and some of those saints are Irish saints?
No, I didn't. Wow.
Oh yeah. I mean, modern voodoo is a synthesis of Catholic dogma that has been superimposed over shamanistic earth magic from Africa.
I think that's what the pagans were doing. They were taking this shamanism and then they basically lost it because the Celtic peoples that then inhabited the Tuatha Dé Danann, these Milesian Gaels, whatever, they pretty much wiped them out. I don't think it was an ethnic cleansing like a purely war thing. I think there was interbreeding. There's talk about them interbreeding, and that they were the descendants of them, and they morphed with the Fomorians. And when you read the tales, there's so many examples of Irish mythology books that survive.
Yeah.
That they all are almost exact copies of each other, found in books all across Ireland at different epochs and different times. The mythology never changed. It didn't even morph, because these Janus figurines that we're talking about may actually be just a throwback to the Irish mythology, and they were putting it in stone as well as putting it in writings. But they even have, the monks, when they wrote it down, they were so detailed and so passionate, and they may have been druids as well, that were actually trying to survive within the church. And they went, okay, we're going to be You know, we're going to be subjugated by the Christianity movement. Let's hide within the church and try and survive.
Yeah.
And they wrote down very archaic terms. They didn't even have the terminology for what it meant, so they put footnotes in the books because they didn't. And had they have understood, the monks have understood fully the full extent of this pagan religion, if you want to call it that, or pagan history. I mean, it was in direct opposition to the church. That would have been just scrubs on the record. So the fact that these books survive, I mean, there's some of them are pristine, 12th century. They're fragments surviving from 7th century. And one of the best known books is the Book of Invasions that I mentioned. I'll give you the English names. The Laura Gala Nahidre, or the Book of Dun Cow, it's known as in English, because it's wrote on a cowhide. And that was symbolic in itself because the cow and the bull are in the stories themselves. It was actually written in bullhide, and that book is almost pristine, and they talk about the bull raids and Queen Maeve, and all the figureheads are all there, and all the stories, they're all the same story, they're all the same interactions, who married who and who interbred with who. Yeah. And they're trying to put time frames in some of this stuff, and they say it might have been around the turn of the millennia, around the time of Christ and stuff.
Are these Shenanigig figures only on churches? Aren't they carved into some ancient rocks on beaches?
Yeah. But I think that the stuff that's in the churches were, like the megalithic monuments, were also just, they built megalithic structures into churches. So, and they may have took these and put them into the masonry as well.
I think they did.
That's personally what I think they did.
I think that, the reason it looks like a grey alien holding open a vagina is because that is a message very similar to what we're seeing in the Venus goddess figurines. It's about fertility. It's about some unearthly, unhuman being interacting with the direct fertility process in humans.
Yeah, and the Janus figurines, these strange, weird shaped, narrow chin, big eyes, these like grey alien looking creatures from Boa Island that we're talking about. I mean, they also have the long, narrow fingers pointing towards the navel, like Easter Island as well.
Yeah, well, they're kind of cupping the area where the reproductive organs are.
Yeah.
We see that in Easter Island. We see it in Ireland.
Göbekli Tepe.
Yeah, Göbekli Tepe as well.
Yeah. I think, and some of these Janus figurines are built into the walls of a church as well. And I just think that they took what they could. And just put it into the ritual buildings and just said, okay, we're your new religion. You can have can have a bit of the old.
Yeah.
Look what didn't the Persian Empire do that? They let people keep their own customs, but you subjugated and you were bowing down to the king, like so.
Yeah, I mean, you can go to Saudi Arabia. A lot of people don't know this, but there are megalithic buildings that are dated. They would be. I think they are dated to about the same time as Stonehenge, 2,450 BC or thereabouts. Mm-hmm. But these are buildings made with megalithic menhirs in circular formations in Saudi Arabia.
It's amazing.
It is amazing, and that kind of stuff is, you have to go to specialist people like us, because for some reason, as far as the mainstream media is concerned, that is off limits. Yeah. There is a whole area of ancient architecture which is never on the mainstream media. For example, on the island of Minorca in the Mediterranean.
Oh yeah, the T-shaped pillars.
Weird, and they're never on TV.
Yeah, they never mention it, do they? It's like probably one of the most interesting.
Yeah,
they're
the oldest buildings, I think, in Europe, and yet they're not on the TV. Now, why is that? And also, there are stepped pyramid kind of platform structures in Tenerife that were meant to have been built by the Guanche people. Well, you see this word Guanche in Latin America as well. So there was probably a stepped pyramid building culture that had gone across the Atlantic from Tenerife to Latin America. And again, it's not on the TV.
Chris, we're way over the time schedule today. What a I knew it would be like this anyway. But Chris, where can people get your work? I'll try and put
Star Gods. You can get my digital book Star Gods and also Stone Age Psychedelia from ChristopherEverard.com. And if you want to watch my documentaries, that have been filmed literally all over the world, in dozens of countries with drones, and you get to see the inside and the outside of a lot of places which aren't on normal TV. That's the Enigma channel. That's enigmatv.com.
Awesome. Chris, always great talking to you. We've got to team up for a bit of research together this year. Definitely, you're more than welcome over to Ireland at some point. We're going to make that happen.
Yeah.
And maybe we'll do Sardinia together. That would be interesting.
That sounds good to me, yeah.
But in the meantime, keep in touch.
Anyone from any of the overseas territories or anyone from the British Empire living in our part of London. And so to see that particular type of character was, not only was it strange, but it was also, ethnically, it's a weird thing to see. Mm-hmm. Well, I didn't realize what that was until many years later. And I was researching the life of a really very, very influential occultist. He was a full-time magician. His name was MacGregor Mathers, and he was a member of the Golden Dawn, which is it's a very kind of well-heeled, rich people. They've had a lot of famous members. Bram Stoker, who wrote Dracula, was a member of the Golden Dawn. And the entire society was kind of sabotaged and taken over by Aleister Crowley. Now, a lot of the Golden Dawn members were also Freemasons. Mm-hmm. And, they had a center that was in London, and they were meeting at a big Freemason center, which is the Grand Lodge of England, which is in Queen Street near Drury Lane. But they also had a kind of initiation center in Paris. So I was, writing, and I was researching my first film in the series of films I've been making since 2007 called Spirit World. I'd come back from Paris, and I'd gone to the house where MacGregor Mathers used to live, and he was a curator at a museum in London called Horniman's Museum. It's a very strange museum. It's a collection that spans across many things. They've got giant spiders. Wow. They've got stuffed walruses, which are 12 feet tall. They've got the biggest collection of ethnomusicology musical instruments from all over the world. They've got Tibetan nose flutes and, gamelans from Indonesia and all this kind of weird stuff there. But because he was a member of the Golden Dawn, he also used the budget of Horniman's Museum to actually buy a huge amount of voodoo and black magic equipment directly from tribal people all over the planet.
Wow.
And I was going up the stairs in the museum and going up to the top floor where they have the top floor display. And there was the black man with the straw hat, in the blazer, with the white shiny shoes and the white trousers.
Wow.
And he was a dummy, and he was part of a voodoo altar that had actually been purchased back in Victorian times. And it's been on display there for many, many years. And he is what's known as a loa. A loa is a voodoo spirit. And they come in all shapes and sizes. There's male ones, there's female ones. Some of the spirits are very boisterous, and they possess people. And when they've got possession of a human body, they're actually smoking cigars, drinking rum. They're swearing. They want sex with everyone. Doesn't matter whether it's a man or a woman.
Wow.
These spirits, I mean, sometimes they're called orishas. There's lots of different names for different types of spirits in the world of voodoo. And so, that had a big effect on me, because I realized that when I was 2 years old back in a house in London, that was a voodoo spirit that had come to my house.
Hey, Chris, I used to live in Bromley, and I used to cycle when I was doing my master's in engineering and research sciences.
Sure, that's now been excavated. It's in a tunnel. It's underneath the Pyramid of the Sun.
Sure.
And it is a time capsule that was placed there. We think at the moment that it was placed there by the Aztecs. And you have objects that have been placed there which span a time frame all the way from the Upper Paleolithic all the way up to the point where basically the Aztec Empire was, really basically finished off, invaded, it was corrupted. You've got three great phases in the recent history of Middle America, Mesoamerica. You've got the Aztecs, the Mayans, and the Olmecs. Mm-hmm. The Mayan, that is such a tragedy because the Mayans, they had a language, they had the hieroglyphic writing system, and essentially they were all murdered. I mean, we're talking about genocide of the Mayan culture by the invading Spanish and by the invading Portuguese. Mm-hmm. Essentially, if they spoke Mayan or they were caught writing Mayan hieroglyphs, they were killed.
Yeah. What about, they were also conquered by other, like the Toltecs. They came in and they pretty much subjugated. Yeah. I think they subjugated them, and somehow they get branded as the baddies where their ritual and sacrifice, but that may have been an influence from Toltecs.
Oh, I mean, you can see in Mel Gibson's film Apocalypto that there was a huge cachet in going off and capturing, people, enslaving them, and we're talking about blood ritual cultures. Mm. All right, and that's why I did actually start the show talking about voodoo, because voodoo, shamanism, and blood ritual, even though this is a subject which you rarely see any reference to it in any of these museums, we know now that the Aztecs, the Mayans, and most probably the Olmecs as well, these are life force, blood ritual based shamanic cultures. And what we find with the time capsule that's been discovered in the tunnel is artifacts that go way back to the Upper Paleolithic. For example, flint spearheads, which are Stone Age implements. These are mixed in with really finely carved limestone and granite statues of individuals that look like sitting Buddhas. They have Oriental features. We can see over and over again with the Olmec culture, which is a culture that it was really at its zenith point around 1600 BC. We can see that there are African Negroid facial features with the large Olmec stone heads.
Oh, yeah.
But at the same time, the smaller Olmec statues and the Olmec masks, which are made from jade, are more Polynesian, Oceania, Japanese, Chinese in terms of their facial features. And so this time capsule, which we believe has been put together by the Aztecs and placed under and buried deliberately underneath
Hi everybody, welcome back to Capricorn Radio TV. We are in the presence of greatness today. We're going to be speaking to Mr. Christopher Everard. This show has been a long time in the making, so we're going to talk about his book, The Stone Age Psychedelia. What an awesome book it is. Chris is with us on the line at the moment, and just a little bio on him before I bring my guest on. Chris Everard is a British author, film director and broadcaster. He presents TV shows about historical subjects and has appeared on the BBC, NBC, TVE, TV1, Canal Plus, and he's feature specialist presenter for CNN Plus. You can check out his website, christophereverard.com. He is a presenter of the TV series The Magic of Egypt, on the Enigma channel. That's at enigmatv.com. And myself and Chris share many interests. And this is more like a think tank today. And I'm really, really excited. We've got so much stuff to get through. We've got a few little announcements just to mention before I bring on Chris. Of course, you can check out the Megalithic Odyssey Symposium. That's megalithicodyssey.com. You can check out a really awesome lineup of speakers and presenters for that. And we're going to feature a little bit on megaliths today with Chris. We've actually got so many overlapping interests. This show could go anywhere today. And I think we're going to probably start with some really exciting discoveries that I know Chris is at the forefront of keeping up with research. He lives the research in real time. So without further ado, let's bring on our guest. Hi, Chris, you're with me on the line.
Hello, James. Nice to be with you.
Oh, great to hear your voice, Chris.
Yeah, you're coming through nice and clear.
Oh, nice. And like I tried to give you a little intro there, Chris, to people, because I know you've got your own radio show, and you do what I do. You do radio, you do TV, you do megaliths.
I do. Yep.
You have a very diverse background, Chris. Tell me a little bit about you before we come on. I know we've chatted many times, Chris, and what's it's the enigma of life, I guess, is the puzzle, the mystery seeking, Chris. It's obviously alluring to anybody that's a kind of awake and aware, but when does this start for you, Chris?
Well, to be honest, I can't really remember a time when I wasn't interested in the paranormal. Mm. I grew up in a house in London that was haunted. Mm. And, my sister had a lot of viewings and a lot of sightings of ghosts.
Wow.
Yeah. And then, I remember I'll give you just one example. It was my second birthday, and I've still got the pictures of, I had a big cake in the shape of a 2. And I remember my mum taking me into the kitchen, sitting me down on the kitchen cabinet, and there was an African man in a striped blazer, very smart, very, very smart,
wow,
with a straw boater and a bow tie and white trousers and white shiny leather shoes, standing in the corner of our kitchen. And I remember, I was 2 years old. I said, "Look, Mum, there's a black man in the kitchen."
Wow.
And, obviously there was nothing there, but I could see him, and he was smiling, but he was staring straight ahead. And when I looked back, he'd gone. And I always remembered that, and I always thought, well, that is a very strange experience, and to see, when I was growing up at that time, you had people from all over the British Empire coming to London to live in London, including, people from Jamaica and Antigua and from Africa. But really, to be honest, at that time and in that part of London, there wasn't really the Great Pyramid at Teotihuacan is really the Aztecs' way of, like we make time capsules to this day, there's modern time capsules being made right now. There's several companies around the planet, and they've made a time capsule that's, it spans 22, 23, 24,000 years.
Wow.
And this has been found using these tiny, tiny robots. The most successful robot is called Tlilok.
That's T-L-A-L-O-K?
T-L-I-L-O-K. And that's a crawler, but there's also these micro flyers as well, these micro drones. And then, like I say, we've also got these hybrid ones now. They look like little motorbikes, but they've got propellers on them. And, like I say, the smaller they are, the better they are for getting through nooks and crannies. So that is really, this is breaking news. This is really what's coming out of it. There are so many artifacts. We're talking about hundreds of artifacts that are being dug out and detected by the micro rovers at the moment that, you could fill a small to medium-sized museum with the amount of artifacts coming out of this time capsule.
This is incredible.
There's crystals. There's stone axes, there's jade axes, there's Buddha-like figurines, but, and this is really, really super, super, super important. Let me just have a look at my notes here, because some of the Mexican village names are very difficult to pronounce. So I want to get the pronunciation right. Is it at Tilapia? Hang on, let me just see.
The pronunciations of the names are crazy. But
they are. The spellings are really crazy as well. There is one place here. It's not Izapa. It could be Tilapia. I've got it in my notes here, but basically, this is the big thing that I've discovered just recently, and I was speaking to the anthropologists and the archaeologists yesterday.
Chris, I'm looking at pictures of some of this stuff here online, and I'm telling you, I'll try and superimpose them in the video, but it's just amazing. This stuff.
Oh, it's the most
dug out of the ground. We kind of think that where it's all done and it's all been dug up, but I mean, so basically, this stuff is underneath the. This is underneath the site of Teotihuacan. So we're saying Teotihuacan was built much later than whatever this site was. This was an underground ossuary chamber offering ritual place.
Yeah.
Sealed off then like a time capsule. Like the megalithic chambers, they were sealed off after their use.
Yes.
Like a little time capsule, then built the pyramid over top of it.
Yes, that's right. I mean, I think that I'm making this new film, Spirit World, which I've been working on for 3.5 years, by the way. I mean, I want to say this to the listeners and the viewers, that if you want to make a kind of cinema documentary and you want to travel to a lot of these places, I mean, this is not something that you make overnight. It takes a lot of time.
If you had all the money in the world, Chris, it still takes you physical amounts of time and planning and organizing.
Yeah, and also, like with the drone technology that I was mentioning, we have had, over the last 4.5 years since I've been making this movie, we have had one kind of giant digital revolution after another, after another, after another.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, now I'm shooting on HD micro cameras. Mm-hmm. I mean, they are about the size of, like an AAA-sized cylinder battery.
Wow. I did 2 masters, and I spent 3 years in Bromley, and I loved it there. But I used to cycle past the Horny Man Museum all the time. I used to cycle in by Beckingham and up by the Horny Man and Dulwich.
Yeah.
And I kept swearing every day I'd go in there. Now I want to go. I want to go check this place out. But I used to cycle past it every day. It's probably one of the only museums I haven't been to in London. But I got so much to talk about, Chris. Wow, that's really fascinating. I guess that's really going to open up the portal for mysteries for you. I guess I want to focus on megalithic mysteries, I guess, towards the end of the show today. But I know we've got some really, really fascinating updates to come through. And I know you, just like me, Chris, you've got so many diverse subjects that you research. Let's roll out with just a little roundtable of exciting discoveries.
Well, the reason I did bring up voodoo is because voodoo, and I know there's a lot of people who don't like me saying this, but this is the absolute truth. Voodoo is a form of shamanism.
Oh, yeah.
And, I know that there's ladies who wear caftans and they've got posters of rainbow-coloured dolphins on their walls and they call themselves shamans and they live in Sedona. And when I say, well, voodoo, where they're cutting the heads off of goats and they're drinking blood, that is also shamanism. They go, oh, no, it's not shamanism, it is.
It's not all pink rainbows and blue elephants like, there is some weird, sinister stuff to shamanism, and it's like brushed under the carpet. It's all supposed to be hippy-dippy in the Western world, but it's not. In the reality of where the shamanism cultures are.
Yeah.
Chris, I want to talk. Let's jump into Teotihuacan, if that's the pronunciation.
Yeah, absolutely.
There's underground discoveries there, Chris.
Yes, there are. Yeah.
Let's get into this stuff. This is incredibly exciting.
Yeah, well, I've got a fleet of drones, and I've been into drone photography, since really basically drones came of age and they were easy to fly. And I've gone for having very, very small drones because I've realized that I'm talking about really small drones with HD cameras, the size of a butterfly. Mm-hmm. They are much better for our type of filmmaking with ancient archaeological sites, because usually there's nooks and crannies and stuff and the big drones can't get in there. But with the little drones, you can actually release them. Also, they fly a lot longer because they're not using so much battery juice.
Yeah, for the power and the weight. And like me, you wouldn't crash them into tunnels when you're trying to drive them through like I did last week. You do crash them.
You crash them a lot. And, you do lose quite a lot of drones when you go on expeditions. But, I mean, that's just the name of the game.
Yeah.
That just goes with the territory. There's no way you can get around it. But now what we've got this new generation of crawler. These are micro crawlers. And they are all-terrain robots. They don't use caterpillar tracks. They've got like 6 legs.
Spider legs.
Yeah, they're like spider legs. They're very, very tiny. They're very lightweight. They're very, very economical in terms of their battery juices. And really, basically, we've had a huge number of fantastic, mind-blowing discoveries in Mexico using a combination of the micro flying drones, the micro crawlers, and then there's these hybrid bots as well.
Wow.
They're crawlers, but they can also take off and fly. And then they can land and crawl and then fly, land and crawl and then fly. So this kind of technological advancement has already, I mean, talk about the textbooks having to be rewritten. What we have in Teotihuacan is we have a time capsule